Hello, welcome. Looks like we have a couple new folks with us here today. I welcome all of you. It's good to be together. If you don't mind, say hello in the chat and let us know where you're calling in from so we can just know each other a little and maybe make some connections. Um, so I hope you all had a meaningful Passover break, and I'm looking forward to this session. So this one is called Bear Withness, Bear Withness. And I'll tell you that the backstory for the title of this shiur, of this session, and also for this chapter of my book was a conversation that I had with a beloved friend and congregant in our community who was grieving the death of his son, who died in a very tragic and freak accident. And he said that one of the hardest things about his grief was that people who were coming to him to try to support him in his grief thought that their job was something different than he perceived their job to be. That they came to him and they were trying often to pull him out of his grief, when actually what he needed was for them to be with him in his grief. And he didn't come up with this phrase. You may have heard of it before from others, and I don't know who actually coined it. But he said, "What I need is for you to bear witness to my pain, to actually just be with me as I experience and navigate this dark chapter, not to try to change me or fix me, just to be with me." So that's kind of the backstory, and that story itself might resonate for some of you. I think that there's a strong instinct in our culture to try to fix what's broken. And it takes a lot of restraint to just be present with what's broken. And yet, for many of us, as people who've been broken, know that what we really need is somebody to just see the pain and affirm and honor the pain. That itself helps in the healing process. So I welcome you today into this conversation, and I hope that this might be a source of comfort and some inspiration for us, each of us in our own journeys toward and through healing now. So welcome everybody. We're going to start by jumping right into the text, and I want to share with you that I think thank you, Jess, for adminning this, as you do so beautifully. Jess has shared the Safaria link with you, and I'm also going to share it with you here on this screen. And what I want to do is, I think I'm not in Safaria. This is the Safaria link. Hang on a sec. Okay, so what I would like to do is um, just first share with you. hmm, there we go. Okay, can everyone see that? Okay, so I just want to start by sharing this story, this well-known story that appears in Genesis chapter 32 about our ancestor Jacob. Jacob was about to encounter his brother Esau, from whom he was estranged for many years. If you remember, Jacob stole the birthright and the blessing of the firstborn from his brother, and then he was warned that Esau had right to come after him and seek vengeance, and so Jacob fled, and he left his country and he went out to the house of Lavan. There he met and married actually four wives, including the two sisters, Leah and Rachel, Rachel being the love of his life, but also Bilhah and Zilpah. He had many children, at least 13 that we know of. And then he is making his way back home now. And as he's journeying back home, Jacob hears report that his brother Esau is nearby and that he's coming with 400 men. And so he has every reason to believe that Esau is going to kill him. And so he does this strange strategizing where he separates out the family, and he asks the servants to go up and first approach Esau, but he himself goes back over the water. He sort of leaves his family on the front lines in some ways, and he goes back over the water as the night is falling. And it says, "Vayivater Yaakov levado." He remains there alone. By the way, tangential side point, this becomes the name of Rabbi Steve Greenberg's work many years later. Yaakov levado becomes the what it means to be Jacob alone. He writes this work about being really the first out gay Orthodox rabbi, and which turns into a book called Wrestling with God and Man. Yaakov Livado becomes his pen name for that, for the first piece that eventually grows into the book. So Jacob is left alone, and a figure comes and wrestles with him until the break of dawn. We talked a couple weeks ago about angels, and this figure is considered in the tradition to be an angel. But this figure comes and wrestles with Jacob throughout the night. When he saw that he had not prevailed against him, and there's some ambiguity here about the he's and the hims. Who are we actually talking about? It seems that this figure or this angel wrenched Jacob's hip at its socket, so that the socket of his hip was strained as he wrestled with him. And then he said, meaning presumably the figure or the angel or the mysterious man in the night said, "Let me go, for the dawn is breaking." But he answered, meaning presumably Jacob answered, saying, "I will not let you go unless you bless me, or until you bless me. Lo ashalecha ki im berachtani. I will not let you go until you bless me." And then the angel or figure or mysterious man says, "Well, what's your name?" And he says, "Jacob." And he responds saying, "You'll no longer be known as Jacob, but now you'll be known as Israel, for you have striven with beings divine and human, and you have prevailed." Okay. So I'm gonna stop the share for a moment so we can look at each other. So this story, this well-known story of Jacob at this very precarious moment in his life, when he is about to face his brother for the first time in many years, when he believes he might be about to die because his brother has the right to kill him, it is a powerful story of struggle. And he does ultimately prevail through the struggle. But part of the reason that Jacob's able to prevail is because he demands of the angel, he insists of the angel that the angel grants him this blessing. And for many years, I understood this story to be communicating to us that even through the deepest and most scarring struggles in our lives, there's often a blessing that comes in the morning. It doesn't mean that you would have chosen that battle, but it means that now that you've gone through the battle, your work and mine is to determine where is the blessing. What have I learned? How have I grown from this experience that I have navigated? Um, in fact, one year, as many of you know, at IKAR, the first day of Rosh Chodesh, in the month of Elul, 1 month before Rosh Hashanah, I put out a prompt to the community in which I ask the community some provocative question and ask people to reflect and write some kind of written response, a short response. And it's been an incredible spiritual practice for our community because we basically start to create the muscle memory for the work of High Holy Days a full month before. And the provocation is designed to make us think about who we are and who we want to become, about what kind of amends we need to make, about what ways we've grown, about what spiritual tools we have to navigate the times we're living in. And so one year I asked the question, what was the blessing that came in the morning for you? I'm going to ask you to think about that right now for yourselves. And some of you might know right away what the blessing is that came in the morning through some kind of really difficult and painful encounter that you had or chapter that you had. You came through it now understanding differently than you did before your own inner strength. Um, a particular relationship that really helped you survive, um, what it means to be in community, right? There are all kinds of blessings that come through the struggle. Again, not to posit that the struggle is there so that you can retrieve that blessing on the other side. But when we look at the struggle in retrospect, we're often able to see that there's growth that comes on the other side. One year, as I was working through this idea, oh, and people wrote incredibly beautiful and profound ideas for the book that year about the blessing that came in the night. But a bereaved parent came to me and said, you know, the assumption of the question, what is the blessing that came in the morning, is that there's a morning. And for some of us, there's no morning. We're in an eternal night because the grief is so profound and the transformation is so permanent. And we talked it through and realized together that even if and when there's no morning, morning, there are still blessings that come in the night. And so for Jacob, when the dawn arose and the angel said, "It's time for me to depart now," and Jacob is injured, but he says, "I'm not letting you go until you give me a blessing." For him, the new dawn arose. But for some people, maybe there is no new dawn. And even still, there is a blessing. And so our work is to identify what those blessings are, even sometimes in the dark of night. So I want to put that idea out there as a kind of backdrop for the conversation that we're going to be having today. The blessing that comes in the night, not the blessing that comes in the morning, but the blessings that come even in the night. And for this bereaved parent, so I asked her, so what are the blessings that have come to you even in the night? And there are many. There's so many. I mean, she talks a lot about what it means to reclaim joy and what it means to dance and to find reason to stay alive, even in the dark of night, even though she knows that she'll never stop grieving. Okay, so I'm offering this as a kind of backdrop for our conversation, and what I want to do now is dive into a lengthier piece of Talmud that might be familiar to some of you, which in the book I cite both in chapter 6 and in chapter 7. And because I use the story in two different ways, but a story about Rabbi Yochanan. And I will share that Rabbi Yochanan is one of the characters in the Talmud who we really understand a lot about his personal story and about his personality, how the suffering that he experienced in his life really shaped who he was as a rabbi and as a healer. And one of the things that we know about Rabbi Yochanan is that he lost both of his parents very early on. He may have been orphaned, actually, but either at a very young age or even his mother may have died in childbirth. Um, he also suffered the loss, it says in the Talmud, of 10 children. Did he really, was there really a Rabbi Yochanan who had 10 children die? We don't know. But the way that his story is told is such that we are to imagine that there is a person who survives unimaginable loss, right? Unimaginable loss. And he's one of the great sages. And the loss has left him not only with an incredible sensitivity toward human suffering, but also a very profound ability to connect with other people who are suffering. Okay, so I want to share with you the story of Rabbi Yochanan, or a couple of different aspects of the story of Rabbi Yochanan coming from the Talmud, from Masachet Brachot, from Tractate Brachot. So now I'm going to go back to any questions, by the way, before we jump into the text here. Okay, I'm going to jump in. You'll raise your hand if you have a question as we're going through. We'll go through the text a little bit, and then we're going to, you know what I may do? I may bring you to the, I'm going to bring you to this version instead, which is it's the same thing. It's just laid out a little bit more clearly so that we can look at the Hebrew and the English at the same time. This is the same thing as the Sefaria sheet. Okay. So, Rabbi Yochanan, one thing we know is that when people would experience a death, he would go to them and offer consolation. And he would say to them, I also suffered the loss of my parents at an early age. And the mourners would find great comfort in knowing that there was somebody else in the world who understood on some level what they were experiencing. And I'm sure we can all relate to this. Sometimes when we are experiencing real heartache, having somebody else who can say, I also navigated that illness, or I also recently experienced a loss like that, can have a very profound effect. Now, it's not for everybody. In fact, I know some people who, when they got their cancer diagnosis, they said very explicitly, I don't want to hear about anyone else's cancer diagnosis. Please don't tell me. But there are other people who have the exact opposite experience, and they say, I need to talk to somebody who has experienced a loss like this. I need to know that I'm not alone. I need to know that I'm going to be able to survive this. I share a couple of those stories in the book, but there have been many more even since I, closed the manuscript on this. Okay, so that's Rabbi Yochanan. He's the person who experienced the loss, and then he goes to the people who are grieving and he offers comfort, consolation, and presence. But now we're moving away from loss and into the area of illness. And there's a series of stories about Rabbi Yochanan that I think are really important for us here. So Rabbi Chia bar Abba Chalash. One of the rabbis, Chia bar Abba, becomes sick. And his teacher, Rabbi Yochanan, comes to visit him and says to him, Chavivina lecha yisurin, is your pain welcome to you? Now, this is a strange question to ask somebody who's suffering. Do you want to be suffering? Do you want to be in pain right now? And I will share with you just as a brief background to this, especially for people who know the story. It's important to know what the background is, which is the whole context in Brachot. Page 5 here is about something called Yisurin Shel Ahava, which is sufferings of love. Sufferings of love. And it's part of a reflection of a rabbinic theology in which there was a belief that sometimes our pain is a reflection of God's love for us. That when the more we suffer, the more God must love us. I will tell you that I don't share that theology. Um, that, but it exists in our tradition. There's a stream, there's a thread that says if you're suffering, it must be because God really loves you. I think we can also understand, even if we don't agree with it or resonate to it, we can understand why someone might find comfort in that kind of theology. Because if I'm suffering and have lost something in this world, at least knowing or trusting or having faith that that means that God loves me, at least it fills some part of my broken heart with a sense of comfort, consolation, etc. So the rabbis, in this context, the rabbis did hold this belief of Yisurin Shel Ahava. And so he says to him, Rabbi Yochanan comes to Rabbi Chia bar Abba and says, is your pain welcome to you? Meaning, do you want to be suffering? Because you might want to suffer because you see that as a reflection of God's love. Okay? For whatever reason, theologically, he's what I appreciate about this, even as somebody who doesn't hold that theology, is that it's a question. He doesn't just walk into the room and make an assumption about how Rabbi Chia is experiencing this pain, but he asks a question. He's asking for theological reasons. As we'll discuss in a few moments, I think that we need to be asking not only for theological reasons, but really for social, emotional, and spiritual reasons. But we'll come back to that when we talk together in a moment. He comes in and sees his sick student and says, basically, do you want to be suffering the way that you are? And Rabbi Chia says, no, I don't want to suffer like this. And he says, I don't want to suffer and I don't want the reward for it. If you like, meaning we live in this reality where people think I'm going to get a reward for this pain. I'll take life without that reward as long as the suffering goes away too. And so once he says that, Amar le havli yadach, give me your hand, says Rabbi Yochanan, And he did, Yahav Yade, he gave him his hand, and Va'okme, Rabbi Yochanan lifts up Rabbi Chia bar Abba. Now, I want to say that we have no idea what actually happened here. We don't know what okme really means. It literally translates as he lifted him up. Did he pull him out of the sickbed and make him well again? Maybe. Or did he lift up his spirits? Maybe. One thing that seems clear from the story is that he holds his hand. He touches his hand. I want to just invite us into that detail for a moment because I want to think about the way that we treat people who are not well, physically not well, or spiritually, mentally, emotionally not well, and what it means that this story is telling us that Rabbi Yochanan goes right to his bedside, asks him a question: do you want to be suffering the way that you are? And then touches him. And in some way, that sacred touch helps heal him, either physically or spiritually or both. I'm going to pause the share for a moment because I'm curious how this is landing for you. This Rabbi Yochanan, who's experienced so much pain in his life, is able to go to Rabbi Chia bar Abba and many others who are experiencing profound suffering. And this is what that encounter looks like. How is that landing for you when you think about what it means to encounter someone who's in pain or the ways that you've been encountered when you are in pain? Yes, Kate.
I suffer from complex regional pain syndrome in both legs. It's considered the most painful condition known to medicine, which my pain is no worse than anyone else's. That's just a medical fact. And for someone to acknowledge that, when I first was diagnosed in a community, this was a story I meant to tell you at some point, Rabbi Sharon. In a community I previously was in, I received no support from the clergy. And when I left that community and went to say goodbye, the head rabbi said to me, I know we let you down, but looking at you was too painful and we couldn't handle it.
Oy.
And and it was an oi. And I never tried to look in pain. I tried my best to, look as normal as possible. I wasn't saying, oh, I'm in pain, help me, help me. But if somebody had just called me, if somebody had just come to visit, I was in bed for 2 years, literally in bed. My husband had to build a PVC tent to hold the blankets because if they touched me, it caused too much pain. But I was told, if someone had just come and held my hand, there was one friend who called one Friday and said, what can I do for you? Anything. And I said, you know what? Shabbat flowers would be lovely. And like an hour later, because it was New York City, they arrived. And that meant so much. So sometimes it's so difficult for people to reach out. I have seen 3 people on their deathbed and been with them when they died and tried to help in whatever way. I held their hand. I lay next to them in bed with them, and yet other people were like, why are you doing that? I was like, I think they need that physical comfort on this journey.
Kate, what's so powerful, part of what's thank you for sharing this part, and I'm so sorry that happened to you. And part of what's so powerful about this story is, in some ways, the failure of the clergy in that community to care for you reinforced for you what the central obligation of being human is, and helped you understand that how important it is to actually show up in those moments. And this is why I love this image, the paradigm of the circling, because the idea that we don't want to turn toward each other. There are people who we want to turn away from. And it's because we worry that their pain is contagious. And it's not, I don't just mean like we're afraid we're going to catch COVID from them. I mean, we're afraid we're going to catch pain from them, right? Even though we know that science doesn't work that way, but we're afraid that if we get too close to their suffering, that suffering will be on our shoulders as well. And I'm so moved. I'm sorry that you experienced it. And I know that part of the reason you are who you are is because you are dead set committed to making sure that other people aren't abandoned in that moment when everybody else wants to turn away from them. And I deeply appreciate that about your spirit. And I am guessing now, and this is something I never thought about, so thank you. I always imagined that Rabbi Yochanan had this kind of instinct because of the loss that he experienced, that he could empathize with somebody who is in a place of loss. And Kate, your story makes me wonder if maybe he wasn't held properly when he had experienced the loss of his parents, of his first child, second child, third child. Like maybe it was precisely the failure of community to show up for Rabbi Yochanan that taught him how to show up for other people. Right. So
Okay.
I really thank you for this insight. That's very powerful. I'm going to go back into the text I want to keep going and share with you a little bit more now about Rabbi Yochanan's story. So here we go. Okay, so here we are. Can you see? Got it? Okay. So he goes to Rabbi Chia bar Abba and presumably to many other people and repeats this formula. Is your pain welcome to you? Do you want to be suffering? And then when the person says no, meaning I don't care if we all abide by this crazy theology, I don't. So then he says, okay, let me hold you. And something about that physical contact, that presence, and maybe his magical healing powers helps lift the person up. Okay. So then Rabbi Yochanan Chalash, Rabbi Yochanan the healer himself gets sick. And Rabbi Hanina comes to visit him. And Rabbi Hanina does to him the same thing that he was doing to everybody else. Rabbi Hanina comes to him and says, is your pain welcome to you? Chavivin alecha yisurin. Is your pain welcome to you? And Rabbi Yochanan, like Rabbi Chia bar Abba, and presumably many others, says, absolutely not. Not my pain and not whatever reward it would bring me. If this makes God love me more, I'd rather not have the extra love. I just want to be relieved of this terrible pain. Rabbi Hanina says, give me your hand. And he did. And Rabbi Hanina lifts up Rabbi Yochanan. Now, the obvious question that the Gemara is going to ask, that the Talmud is going to ask, is why does Rabbi Yochanan need Rabbi Hanina to pick him up? He's the one who has the magical healing power. He lifts other people up. Why does he need Rabbi Yochanan to come in and lift him up? Right? We understand the question? It seems like if you're the magic, why do you need it from somebody else? And the answer is Ein chavush matir atzmo mi beta asurim. But a prisoner can't free himself from prison. So I'm going to pause here for another moment. A prisoner can't free himself from prison. So even the healers need to have healers. This connects back to what we were talking about 2 weeks ago, right? From chapter 6, that even the caregivers need to have caregivers. Even the massage therapist sometimes needs to get a massage, right? And you know that all therapists are supposed to be in therapy and all rabbis should be too, right? The healers need to we need to receive healing too. And here the rabbis say in such a powerful way, Ein chavush matir atzmo mi beit asurim, that we cannot expect a prisoner to release herself from prison, meaning that there's something about the process of liberation. They're using a liberatory framework here, right? That necessarily brings us into partnership with other people. We've talked about Colin Campbell here in this session many times, and his beautiful book, Finding the Words. And Colin says that everybody says that they grieve differently, but actually one thing that is a kind of shared or universal principle of grief is that you can't do it alone. that it has to be done in dialogue with others. It has to be done in community in some way. And here the rabbis are saying, even Rabbi Yochanan himself, this magical healer, needed somebody else to take care of him. So he could go from bed to bed to bed. He could teach people how to engage in this healing process. But when he himself got sick, he could not heal his own wound. He needed Rabbi Hanina to come to his bedside and help him heal. I'm going to pause for a moment to see how that lands for you. Then we're going back into the story because this is where it gets really good. Oh, the title of Colin Campbell's book. So Colin, Marilyn, thank you for asking. So Colin and Gail are beloved IKAR community members who I write about in the book. Their two children were tragically killed in a car crash. And they've both become incredible teachers about grief. And Colin wrote a book called Finding the Words. And he also created what he calls a one-man shit show, which was it's a one-man show about the grief and loss. And they're very powerful teachers. And so and very beloved in our community, as their children were as well. How does this land for you? This ein chavush matir atzmo mibeit asurim, the idea that we can't do this on our own. Nobody can do this on their own. Both the idea that we can't recover from illness on our own, but also the placement of a liberatory framework here that when leaving prison, we need to do that in partnership, meaning there has to be somebody who sees you enough and loves you enough that they can help you escape from the prison that is containing you. I'm going to go quickly to Barbara, to Rabbi Zaki, and then Matt.
Thank you. I just wanted to share. I've been trained as a Reiki master, and I put out the energy. I ask permission, all that stuff, but I forget to do self-healing when I need it. So I just wanted to say sometimes it's just not in my realm. I'll do it for everybody else.
Yeah.
But I've reminded myself at times that that's an important thing to do, and I'll do it.
Barbara, you're not alone here. I mean, I think that caregivers are often the last people to ask for help. And it's partially because we know that there are so many other people who are suffering worse than we are, right? Even the way Kate just said, you have this condition and it's the worst kind of, human pain, and yet it's no worse than anyone else. I mean, you said both of those things in one sentence because you wanted immediately to catch yourself so that you don't get at other people's pity and sympathy, because there are all these other people who need support and help. And that's a very natural response for caregivers. And it's real. Maybe you need your friends and loved ones to help remind you that you also need the love and care, RBZ. Okay, quickly, Matt and Cheryl. Where are you, Matt? I lost you on my screen. Oh, you have to unmute.
Much of the pain we feel is because we're disconnected from people. Even with Kate, it's just real, actual, honest pain, but it was also not seeing people, not being with people, not going places. So we need the community, just, if nothing else, is to heal that piece of the pain, is to make that actually not pain.
That's beautiful. And I think we often compound whatever physical pain people are experiencing with loneliness on top of the physical pain, right? And so there's something that I love about Rabbi Yochanan's presence, that he's able to help people heal in some way just by showing up at their bedside. We're going to talk more about this in just a moment. I want to hear from Cheryl. Hi.
Hi. Having been in the healing field for over 40 years, and being a natural caregiver, that is my natural instinct. Then when my sister died, and also I was experiencing a lot of grief and pain about other things, I realized I did need community that couldn't be offered to me just by me being at home with Netflix or something. And so that's what brought me to IKAR. And that is the saving grace of this revelation coming out of this incredible place of pain, even though I'm always going around helping everybody else, which I still am doing at IKAR whenever I can. But the thing is that there's so much power also that I recognize in allowing other people the gift to help me. There is a reciprocity. And we always think giving, oh, that's cool. But there's an incredible gift we give to other people by receiving their love. And that just really is helpful in this journey.
That's really beautiful, Cheryl. Thank you. And I'm so glad you found your way here to
Thanks.
this community. And you do give so much. I mean, I think I shared this story with you, with our community at some point, and maybe in this class. So forgive me if you already heard this, but I have this very distinct memory at my father's Shiva of a beloved community member who schlepped all the way from Malibu during rush hour to my Shiva holding a case of LaCroix. And I was like, you do not need to do this. We have enough drinks here. Like, and you, like, for you, this is I mean, to fight weekday LA traffic from Malibu to, where we are is insane. And he said, I don't think you realize how important it is for me to be able to do something for you. Right? It really matters. It matters. And so, and it was a good lesson for me, actually. Like, don't prevent him from doing it because it matters to him. And actually, it's nice to have the drinks too. But really, it's really about having his presence. Okay, I'm going back into the story. This takes a really interesting twist here. So here we go. So, now we know in Chavush Matir Atzmo Bibeit Asurim, a prisoner can't release himself from prison, and now the story goes on. Then Rabbi Elazar fell ill, yet another rabbi. And Rabbi Yochanan came to visit him, which means, by the way, we have a series of stories. First, Rabbi Yochanan as the caregiver, then Rabbi Yochanan as the one receiving the care from Rabbi Hanina. Then Rabbi Yochanan's back at it, and he's going to heal Rabbi Elazar. Okay, so he goes to Rabbi Elazar's, and he's going to visit him. And this time, the story, which has followed a particular pattern, kind of breaks the pattern. Okay, because remember, in each of these cases, they go in and they say, "Is your pain welcome to you?" No, not my pain, not my reward. Well, this time, it's a slightly different narrative. He sees that Rabbi Elazar is lying in the dark. He pulled back his own sleeve, and the whole room, this is Rabbi Yochanan, pulls back the sleeve on his arm. It's a little seductive here. He pulls back the sleeve on his arm, and the whole room fills with light. Again, I've told you that Rabbi Yochanan is kind of a magical figure. He's a deeply spiritual person. We do know that there are some people who, when they walk in the room, it feels like they radiate light, right? Because of their goodness. Imagine that. But what they're describing here is a kind of powerful, very powerful spiritual presence where, like, the more of him that's revealed in this room, the greater the light. Since Rabbi Elazar is lying in a pitch black room, nothing can be seen. Rabbi Yochanan's presence brings light into the room. And with that light, he can see that Rabbi Elazar is crying. He's lying in bed and he's weeping. And so Rabbi Yochanan asks him, why are you weeping? So far, it's a different pattern. We're learning more information here than we have from the other cases that we've seen. But I deeply appreciate that he asks, Amai kabachet, why are you crying? He asks the question. He's not, so far, he's coming into the place with a posture of curiosity. But then he goes on. If it is because you're worried that you haven't studied enough Torah, we've learned that whether a person studies a little or a lot, they still get credit provided that they direct their heart to heaven. Okay? So what's happening here? Rabbi Yochanan walks into a room. Rabbi Elazar's in a pitch black room, can't see anything. He brings a little light into the room. He sees that his friend, colleague, is weeping and not moving in bed. And he asks a question, but he immediately starts to answer his own question. Well, why is he answering this way? He's assuming, well, a rabbi in bed crying, it must be because he feels bad that he hasn't learned enough in his life. Well, don't worry about that if that's why you're crying, because you're still going to get credit as long as your heart's in the right place, even if you haven't studied enough Torah. Okay. But it seems like that doesn't comfort Rabbi Elazar. And so then Rabbi Yochanan goes on and he says, well, maybe it's because you don't have enough sustenance, because you're struggling, you're living in poverty, you are poor. And he says, if that's the reason why, not everyone gets to eat at 2 tables. Okay? Not everyone gets to be rich. So stop crying. It's okay. Either your heart's in the right place, so God's not going to judge you for not learning enough, or not everybody has the privilege of being rich, so stop crying. If you're crying over children, maybe you're crying because you either never got to have children or you had suffered the death of a child. Well, look, he says, this is a bone from the little finger of my 10th son. This is a horrific image. But what we understand about Rabbi Yochanan is that when his 10th child died, he kept the bone when the rest of the body was buried, and he put it in a little pouch and he wore it around his neck so that his child was always with him, his 10th child, and loss was always with him. And that in some way humbled him. It may have also been the source of his radiance. It may have been the source of his magical healing powers. But he kept his child with him. But what is he saying to Rabbi Elazar here? If you're crying over the loss of a child, well, I've lost 10 children, and look at me, I'm still here. And only then does Rabbi Elazar respond. And what he says is very interesting. He says, no, that's not why I'm crying. It's not because I didn't learn enough Torah. It's not because I'm not rich enough. And it's not because something happened to my child. I'm crying for the beauty in this world that will fade away in the dust, meaning that everything beautiful that exists now will one day not exist in the world. And Rabbi Yochanan responds saying, that's a very good reason to cry. And so he basically sits down at the bed and weeps with Rabbi Elazar, and the two of them cry together for all of the beauty in this world, which will eventually fade away into the dust. It's such a tender story. And then at some point, after a while, Rabbi Yochanan turns to his friend, and they've both had a good cry. And that's when he says, is your pain welcome to you? The part of the story that we're familiar with from above, when he had this encounter with Rabbi Chia bar Abba and others, and when Rabbi Hanina had this encounter with him, is your pain welcome to you? And that's when Rabbi Elazar says, no, I don't want to be suffering like this. And I don't even care if there's a reward that comes from the suffering. I don't want this pain anymore. And at that point, Rabbi Yochanan says, give me your hand. And he does. And Rabbi Yochanan raises him up. So I'm going to pause here again. What's different in this third story than in the way that the pattern breaks? What is the moral and spiritual resonance to the third story and the moral message from the third story? What can we learn from here that we could not have learned from the other 2 versions of the story? Sarah, I need you to unmute. We can't hear you. Okay.
Thanks. Yeah, so I was actually a little shocked when he so quickly, comes with all of these reasons why he, projects onto this person. And it seems to me that if he was such a healer, how he fell into that trap, which of course it's not like I've never done that. But anyway, I was just really struck that he did that. And then fortunately he was able to to turn around, turn away, realizes not that that's not what his friend needed, but I have a kind of question of why would he have started off that way in the first place? I guess so that we can learn a lesson from it.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I'm going to go to Ronnie. I have some thoughts about that. Well, thank you, Sarah. Ronnie. Oh, can you hear me? Oh, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we got you.
It's David. Ronnie and I are sharing the same image.
Hi, David.
I've been a healer for many, many years, and one of the best lessons I learned was from a teacher. Because when you go into a room and deliver really bad news, there's always shock and fear and tears. Or if you go in, the worst news is your child has died, and what my mentor taught me was feel your feelings while you're there, cry with the family, be sad with family. And I must admit, in all of my healing experience, that's one of the most profound lessons that I learned, that you need to be present with your feelings. And that's what I take from this.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that, David, and also for your work. I mean, that is incredibly holy and difficult work to do. Thank you. Marilyn, did you have a thought?
Well, at first I thought, well, maybe because he had a sense of who this particular rabbi was, and perhaps he'd known him for a long time, and I know sometimes people assume that some of us, because of the particular calls that we have on our lives, that we have this more direct line and that we don't feel the same things that other people feel. And he might have been assuming that about this particular rabbi. And then I realized the other two people were rabbis as well. Sometimes, I have fallen into the trap of trying to give people their words. And that may have been something that he fell into.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. Yeah, I mean, they say in fundraising that you're supposed to, when you make the ask, you're supposed to get really quiet. Because then we feel when you say, I'd like to ask you for $10,000 for my, righteous cause. And then when they're quiet, when the other person doesn't respond immediately, we're like, or 9 or 8 or 5 or whatever you can, but you're just supposed to get quiet after the ask. And I think that there's some truth to that translating into here too. Like he comes into the room and the first thing he does is, why are you weeping? But when Rabbi Elazar does not respond, he tries to fill the space with his own assumptions. And I still think that you might be right. Even though the others were rabbis, maybe he knew something about Rabbi Elazar, right? That was different from the others. That maybe because of their personal relationship, he felt like, well, I know you, and I'm assuming that. And and he was wrong. He was wrong. I mean, I think that there's something very, very powerful about giving people the chance to show you who they are, even if you think you already know that very well who they are. So it strikes me that part of what, there's the amateur mistake of, I'm new to this, and so I'm going to try to fill the space because it's awkward to sit in silence when Rabbi Elazar doesn't respond. But there's also the old pro mistake, which is, I'm going to fill the space because I've been doing this for 20 years. Nobody's suffered like I have. I know suffering. I'm going to tell him why he's upset. And I think there's something incredibly humbling about Rabbi Elazar's response, which is, and only when he hears that response is he actually able to feel his own big feelings, like David is pointing to. Rabbi Yochanan was known not only to be incredibly empathic, but also incredibly beautiful. He was a man of striking beauty. In fact, I mean, there are all kinds of stories in the Talmud about his physical beauty. And some of our rabbis were not beautiful people. And in fact, they're, physically beautiful. And there's stories about like Rabbi Yeshua, for example, who was, considered very ugly. And the Caesar's daughter mocks him for being ugly. And he says, go tell your father to put all of his fancy wine in gold barrels. And of course, the wine goes bad. And he says, sometimes the holiest things need to be kept in wooden barrels and not gold barrel. Like, so there's this idea that physical beauty doesn't necessarily correspond to goodness, but in Rabbi Yochanan, it did. And he was incredible. He was an incredibly beautiful man. And so here, in fact, there's even a story that like that they used to position Rabbi Yochanan outside of the mikveh. So when the women would go to immerse at the end of their menstruation, they would see Rabbi Yochanan, and that would arouse them so that they'd want to sleep with their husbands, because otherwise they probably wouldn't want to, and they needed to perpetuate the people. So Rabbi Yochanan was this really gorgeous guy. So when Rabbi Elazar says, I'm crying for the beauty of this world, which will fade away, it's also very personal for Rabbi Yochanan. It's like, even you, Rabbi Yochanan, even you are not, invulnerable here. Like, you are also going to fade away at some point. And so only when Rabbi Yochanan is touched like that, is he able to experience what David's describing, this experience of being by the bedside and letting yourself be in the fellowship of suffering, as Henry Nouwen describes, this Catholic theologian. Only then can he actually help with the healing. And the reason that I love this story so much is because I realized that a few things. One, I think part of the reason that Rabbi Yochanan gets sick in the first place is because he's a caregiver and because he does go to everybody's bedside. I don't think he catches it from touching their hand. I think he catches it from being empathic and being present with everybody. And at some point, his body just breaks down until he's in bed himself. And he actually needs Rabbi Hanina to come to him and say, hey, listen, it's not just you taking care of everyone, it's also us taking care of you. But when he emerges from that and he's able to return to the work, he may have lost some of the grace or sensitivity that he had before. Maybe he says, okay, I'm going to fortify now because I don't want to get sick again from all this pain. And I'm just going to work on the assumption that I know why you're hurting now. And it doesn't work. The healing doesn't work that way. He needs to be vulnerable in order to help the other heal. And it's really scary to walk into a dark room with somebody who's weeping and clearly in a lot of pain and ask if you can sit down and just hold them and weep with them. It's really terrifying. And so as a result, Ruth, I'm going to come to you in just a moment. Thank you. As a result, I think often when we do visit people who are not well, first of all, we don't, right? We try to avoid them, or we try to visit them at a distance. But when we do, maybe we stand when they're in bed. And so as I write about this, like, so there's a kind of physical distancing from the sick. And what does it mean to say like doctors do this when they come into the hospital bed? Like there's, the distance between the patient and the caregiver is really extreme. And so when we walk into a hospital room or a room where Rabbi Elazar's lying in the room crying, immediately he wants to turn on the light, right? But what if we walk in and say, can I just sit with you in the dark here? Like Eve did for Adam that first night. We talked about this many sessions ago. Can I just be with you in the darkness? Like my congregant said, I don't want you to pull me out of the darkness. I want you to bear witness to my pain. I just want you to sit with me because I don't want to be alone while I'm grieving. Ruth.
Well, I also found it interesting that in the trying to guess what the pain was, he was dismissive.
Mm.
And that
Right.
the one that he experienced was kind of like the great existential angst of impermanence. Like it's the one we all share, and that's the one that got through, and that's the one that elicited empathy, that really got them to connect.
That's so powerful. It is dismissive. It's because if you're crying for this, well, then it's really okay. because don't worry, God will take the reward because your heart's in the right place. Or don't worry, not everybody gets the blessing of eating at two tables. You can't be both a scholar and wealthy, right? That's what he's saying. So, and if you're crying about your kid, well, I lost 10 kids and I'm fine. So, you're right. It's very dismissive until he can't dismiss it because it's just the shared existential reality. Cheryl, thank you, Ruth. Cheryl, I'm gonna go to you quickly and then we're gonna close. Hi.
Hi, I'm at the gym. Didn't mean anyway. What about the pain that we're all feeling with what's happening in the country? Because it's kind of taking over my body, and I wake up depressed, and I'm looking at my personal life, and it's not in my personal life. It's this.
Yeah. I mean, thank you for sharing that. You are not alone. And I think that the message is that you're not alone, both because I think many of us are feeling that kind of, you wake up and you're like, why do I feel terrible? Ah, that's why I feel terrible. But I think the message is both from the text and also the deepest spiritual messages, we have to remind ourselves that we are not in this alone. We cannot navigate this storm alone. And we need to find our way to each other again and again and again and learn how to sit by one another's side, and share the strength that we do have. And Cheryl, some days you're going to need, Kate to come sit by your side, and help you recognize, and help you recognize that you're not alone. And some days you're going to have to go and sit by Nancy's side, and share that she's not alone, or by Kathy's side. So I think I don't want to be trite about this or facile. I really believe that the way that we navigate this time is together. That's the only way. And it's not by telling each other the answers. It's actually by learning how to sit and cry together, and then maybe figure out together what our next steps are going to be. So thank you for raising that. I will close by in our final moment by just sharing this. As you'll see in the source sheet, the last text I bring is something from the Shulchan Aruch, which is from the halachic Jewish legal codes that essentially remind us that our job when we go to bring comfort, when we're on the side of the people who turn to the right in that sacred ritual at the temple, and we're going to give comfort to someone coming from the left, our job is to be perceptive enough to try to recognize what they actually need from us, not give them what we need, which is what Rabbi Yochanan was trying to do in this last case, but open our hearts enough to try to perceive, what does Kate actually need right now? Is it flowers? Is it a visit? She may not want to visit, right? And I will share, when some of you were there when I did my book launch at IKAR in February of last year with Michaela Watkins, and Michaela shared this this phenomenal and terrible story that she was grieving, and a friend came over, let herself into the house, and just got into bed with Michaela and was just holding her. And all Michaela was thinking was, get out of my bed, get out of my house. Like, I don't want that, right? Now, that's the contrary message to what we've been saying, which is be present and show up. But it's really not contrary. It's really just a reminder that we should learn the lesson of Rabbi Yochanan, which is, you think you know what someone else wants? You don't know. We're all different. So ask somebody, right? I'm going to Trader Joe's. I'd love to pick you up some groceries. What do you need? Ask somebody instead of just showing up being like, here I am to snuggle you in your bed when that's the last thing that you want. Here I am to tell you that don't worry. I know you haven't learned enough Torah, but it's all from your heart, so you're going to be fine. It's a very humbling reminder that we're not here to fix each other. We don't exactly know each other's hearts. Even our closest people in the world, we don't necessarily know what they want or need. Our job is to be present, and to be present with both compassion and with curiosity. Reminding us again, is your pain welcome to you? Is this something that I can help you with right now? Or do you want me to pull you out of the pain, or do you want me just to sit by your side? I'm going to share one last story with you because I mentioned Colin earlier. And I share this somewhere in the book. I can't remember which chapter, but one of the stories that we learned about Hart, their son, their beautiful son, was a story that somebody posted on Instagram after Hart died, that one day she was really suffering, She was just a kid in high school and she was having a horrible day. And she was sitting on a bench outside of the high school and she was crying. And Hart, who was like 14 at the time, walked by her and he saw her. He was with this great, like, eclectic group of friends that he had. But he saw this kid who he didn't really know, crying on a bench. And he walked over to her and he said, hey, he said, is it okay if I sit with you? And he sat down and he said, do you want me to try to make you laugh? Or do you want me to just sit down and be next to you? And she said to him, like, I want you to distract me. Can you try to make me laugh? And so he did. So I love this story so much. I mean, what 14-year-old has that instinct? It's so powerful. What grown-up has that instinct? But what I love is that my assumption would have been, she doesn't want you to make her laugh. She just wants somebody to be near her so she's not in pain alone. But actually, she did want someone to make her laugh. And he had the wherewithal to know that he should ask. And they weren't even friends. I mean, she wrote this saying, we barely knew each other's name. But he saw a person crying and went over and said, hey, can I sit with you? Do you want this or do you want that? And gave her the space to make that decision. I love that story so much. And love these, beautiful kids so much. I want to thank you all for learning. We have one more session left. Be with us next Tuesday. We will talk about curiosity and what it means when the person coming in the other direction is not coming toward you, but might be coming at you with ideas that cause you pain, and how we can reorient ourselves to even engage that with an open heart. So grateful to all of you for making the time. Have a beautiful week. Thank you.